Now
All
you can
right,
crumple
show's
up that
on.
post-it note.
Right there. We're good to go. Okay,
What, the
good
note says
morning.
push record?
Yes, it does. I make one every time so I don't forget, and Olivia reminded me very kindly. All right, this is the second meeting of the Schoodic Monthly Housing Forums. Thanks again, everyone, for joining. I think everyone was here last time except for Tom and Jackie. Tom, if you'd like to go first, just quickly introduce yourself, say where you're from, what your role
Tom
is.
Bailey, oh, okay. Um, Tom Bailey, I'm from Sorrento. I'm on the planning board, and I also been involved with HCPC on the salt um, conversation. And at Sorrento, I think, has an interesting housing situation, which we can get into later as we progress.
Yes, yes, they do. And Jackie, real quick, if you want to just introduce yourself.
Sure. Jackie Weaver, and I'm a selectman in Gouldsboro. And I was part of a housing study that we did, I don't know, a couple of years ago, I guess. And so we were, really interested in moving ahead at some point. We have some housing that's under construction. It's not ours. It's an independent contractor who's building 6 units on Route 1, heading towards Steuben, heading east. And I think plans a second building, but Josh would know more about that. So, but we're still very interested in the whole subject and have worked with Maine Coast Heritage Trust on a piece of property. So,
Excellent. And yeah, we can give a little more updates on that parcel in a little bit. And I did include a little bit of commentary on the Gouldsboro Winter Harbor housing study in here, but at the end, if you and Josh and anyone else feels they have a little more insight and more commentary on that, you're more than welcome to talk about that. But
okay.
today I'm going to just give a brief overview of the highlights and takeaways from the housing needs assessment that we HCPC completed for Hancock County at the end of last year and published at the beginning of this year. A lot of high level takeaways. I encourage you to view the assessment itself, which is links on our website, and the link will be shared within this group. It can be downloaded, and if you download it, every section in the document in the table of contents is hyperlinked, so you can jump from section to section. Great. If you are interested in diving a little more into the topics we discussed today, or if you want to take a quick nap, it might help you do that too. I'm not sure. It depends how interested you are. But either way, definitely encourage you to take a look at it at some point if you haven't already. And I will share my screen and we can get started here. Are we good? Excellent. All right, as I mentioned, this was done all throughout 2024, essentially, and published right at the beginning of 2025. And so a lot of the data in here was from, I guess, most recently 2022 or 2023. And I don't think anything has significantly changed in the last year or so. So it's still relatively accurate and paints a good picture of what's happening in the county housing wise. Overall, starting with demographics, again, a lot of this is something that I think we all know. A lot of this in the assessment is things we all know, but I felt it was important to get it documented and put all in one place so we can have it to reference and use moving forward. The population of the county is continuing to grow, although not as quickly as it has in the past, and is still projected to grow by 2030. And as you can see on the figure on the right there, it is projected to grow older than it is now. The lighter shades in this figure indicate younger populations, those getting small over time, and the darker shades get a little larger over time. These are population projections from the Maine State Economist. And so looking beyond 2030 might can be a reach, but it's still a bit of an indication of how the population is projected to change over the next decade or so. Currently, those that are 55 and over, right around 50, projected to be 55%, 46% of the population by 2030. And the 65 and over population is also projected to grow during that time. Households themselves also projected to grow, although not super quick, but it is projected to be an increase in households. And so, along with the population increase, and so it's important that we create enough housing to help sustain the existing population and any sort of population that is coming into the county. And a lot of that population growth, I think, is primarily due to in-migration, people moving to the county from either other parts of the state or from other parts of the country or beyond. Because in the last decade, number of deaths did outnumber the number of births in the county themselves. And so, to something as a county we'll need to keep in mind is that people are moving here for one reason or another, and they will need to be accommodated housing wise. Household sizes themselves was estimated around just over 2 persons per household, and that number is projected to slowly decline by 2028. Um, Kind of relates to older households. Maybe they've already had children or no longer planning on having children. Um, and a lot more detail on the demographics of the county in the assessment itself, for the case you were interested in digging even deeper.
It would seem that when you're talking about people coming in from out of the area, that could be a particular reason why the older age group would increase dramatically because you have retirees coming in. That's also why you would slip down to the 2 per household, because if you have mom and dad that are retired and coming out here to populate, there goes your age up and there goes your population per household down.
I definitely think there's a correlation there. Yeah. And we're all familiar with this being a popular retirement destination. And we can get into a little bit later when it comes to the housing too, but there's definitely a lack of um, facilities for older adults. There's some residential care facilities, but right now there's no nursing homes in the county. That's another challenge um, that ties into all of this. In the assessment, there is a entire section just kind of overviewing the Hancock County economy. Um, Jobs themselves have remained relatively stable over the past decade. There was obviously a dip during the COVID year, but there has been a little bit of a rebound as far as the labor force itself and the number of jobs that are available in the county. And unemployment has remained relatively steady and even uh, gone down a little bit since 2020. So, um, job wise, labor force wise, things are relatively stable as they've been in recent years. You can see the figure on the top right kind of shows the top 5 industries for employees in Hancock County and how it compares to the rest of the state. Retail trade and the accommodation and food services industry are the most popular, which is related to the tourism economy that's in the county. And it's nearly 1/3 of all county employees are in those 2 industries. And while there are opportunities for jobs, a lot of those salaries um, aren't what they need to be to afford the housing that's currently available right now. A lot of those occupations within those industries fall below the $40,000 dollar annual wage mark. And so that makes it a struggle for anyone in those populations, be it a single household or even 2 household incomes, to afford an affordable place to live, either owner or renter. In the study, there is a table where we calculated the maximum affordable um, homeowner price and monthly rent price for all the different occupation groups in the county. And this is based on employment and wage data that was most recently available. And the way it was calculated, just around 2/3 of those occupation groups really couldn't comfortably afford a home more than $200,000. And as we know, that's pretty hard to find nowadays. As far as employees themselves, around 2/3 of the working population in the county also lives in the county. The rest go outside of the county for work, and there's around 7,000 employees that come into the county for work but live outside. And the most popular destination they're coming from is Bangor and Penobscot County, as far as workers that are outside of the county. And that 6,725 number represents a potential group of new residents that could be here and might want to live here if they so choose, and if housing was available and affordable. And so that in-migration that could be taken from these workers is definitely something to consider when thinking about demand and the types of homes and housing that is needed, because depending on how far they're coming from, they might want to live in Hancock County, but right now they just can't. Pulled a similar calculation for the Schoodic area itself. Use the four Schoodic towns: Sullivan, Sorrento, Gouldsboro, and Winter Harbor. Around 1,300 working individuals in the area. Most of them are leaving the county for work. Of course, it's a smaller geographic area, less jobs are available. And a lot of these folks are going to other parts of the county for work. And as far as the 450 or so that are coming into the county for work, or into the Schoodic area, I should say, are coming from other parts of the county, and then also Steuben, Millbridge, Cherryfield are some of the more popular areas outside of the county where folks are coming into the Schoodic area for work. And again, this 450 represents part of a population that could be part of Hancock County if affordable and available housing was in their reach. And the assessment itself goes into other information about the economy. There's a deeper dive on taxable sales in economic service areas, gets into some tourism information and park numbers and how the impact of the park is impacting employment and the county economy, gets into the fisheries, and there's some data information about that. I can encourage you to dive in if you're curious about learning more. Everyone's favorite topic, seasonal housing and short-term rentals. There's an entire section on short-term rentals in the assessment itself. All this data I pulled from AirDNA, which, if anyone's not familiar, I suppose it's one of the leading sources for short-term rental data. It does require a subscription, and so during the assessment, we purchased a subscription, and I pulled data from the past 3 years. So anything that we see in here is from July 2021 to June 2024. And the way AirDNA kind of breaks down their markets and submarkets is the market for this region is called the Down East Acadia market, and it encompasses coastal Hancock and coastal Washington County, essentially. And the next level they break it down is into submarkets. And in Hancock County, there are 15 different submarkets, and it kind of gets confusing as far as where the boundaries are. And all this is detailed in the assessment itself, breaks down which towns are in each submarket. Real simple, Bar Harbor and Mount Desert are their own submarkets, is how AirDNA classifies it. And then in all these other submarkets, there's usually 2 or 3, maybe 4 towns. In the Winter Harbor submarket, that encompasses both Gouldsboro and Winter Harbor. And then, strangely, the Hancock submarket includes Franklin, Sullivan, and Sorrento. And I'll get a little bit into those more specifically in the next couple of slides. But overall, during this 3-year period, the way I calculated it, there was around 4,500 total listings during that time that were active at one time, and active can be, for a night or for an entire year. Um, and that number encompassed roughly 11% of all the housing units in the county. And it's a little more in some of these submarkets than it is others, of course. In Bar Harbor, um, around 18% of the total listings in the county. Ellsworth submarket, also a lot of short-term rentals in there. And notably in Bar Harbor as well, just over 20% of the total housing units in the town were listed at some point as a short-term rental. Um, and that number is 16% for the Winter Harbor submarket, and in Hancock it was around 10%. And I will explain that a little more. As far as the rentals themselves, mostly single-family homes, uh, healthy mix of 1 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms, 3 bedrooms. Usually listed as available between 1 to 90 nights throughout the year, or between 91 and 180 nights. So over half available for half the year, not as much long-term residences as other parts of the country. And as expected, everything is cyclical. There's a boom during the summer months as far as active listings go, as well as the prices that they charge, and occupancy as well. All ebbs and flows during the seasons. And as far as seasonal units themselves, the way that we look at it for census data, vacant units that are classified as for seasonal, recreational, or occasional use, those comprised close to a third of the county's total housing units in 2020. So it's a fair percentage of units that are offline part of the year and could potentially be used as year-round housing, if they were made available to do so. And if folks do have questions, you're welcome to jump in. Otherwise, we can take them at the end and discuss some of this stuff a little more.
Well, let me ask you this. Sorry, Tom.
Go ahead.
So you're saying I know the answer, but the way you said it is that these housing opportunities could be available year round if offered. I know the answer because I've been told personally. Did you find any conclusive evidence as to why people do not offer them year round?
I mean, I suppose we do know the answer is because they use them to rent out and get a little more money. No,
Considerably more, and that's what I've been told.
yeah,
Why would I hurt my bottom line when I can make big dollars?
right.
And
And I think
that's one of the things that I think we're all up against when you look at the percentage numbers, is there's no incentive for a private landowner to put in permanent resident housing, outside of selling a home because they can make bank on 12 weeks a year versus
right.
12 months.
And I haven't dove into it yet, but on Nantucket Island in Massachusetts, there is some sort of incentive program that they've created to incentivize year-round residences. Something I have to look into more and get into a little more, and maybe we can share that link after this meeting goes out. But I'm curious to see how they're doing with that.
I've also heard, and I don't know if it's actually backed up, but there is less impact on the private infrastructure. There's more impact by high volume short-term rentals on septics and town waste and other things. But if you're thinking about having a year-round resident who is not being careful and is living their life in that space, that is a lot more wear and tear on a house and a lot more responsibility for landlords. But I wonder if there's actual realistic assessments of, is it more wear and tear and responsibility?
Well, people that do property management, they talk about that the turnover rentals that they have to do, there is a lot more involved versus if you had it rented out. The money is the thing. So you have a turnover come in, someone's out, someone's in, you're going and you're cleaning it, you're doing the stuff, and then you run the risk of still the septic because you don't know how do you control how many people they're bringing in, and so you have the volume of usage on your water on your septic are increased, and when people don't have a vested interest, go chase somebody down. Was that broken last weekend or was it broken just this weekend? And find where the damages occurred. So they're always playing chase their tail. So they have there is one aspect that it's a losing battle for them, that they do make an increased amount of money, but there is an increased maintenance on the properties. That's why they have to do it. That's why they have to charge so much. I don't fully buy into that, but that's part of the theory.
Hmm.
The problems you have dealing with a short-term rental, the short-term renter is going to be in and out. If you have a year-round renter, you run into, I don't know what it is in Maine, but I know most places it can be hard to get rid of a renter with a lease or whatever, and you're stuck with that problem for a longer term. A short-term renter, you is out of there. Um, so that, and as well as what Ray said, there's obviously a significant increment if you're, getting $1,000 a week versus, you know, $1,500 a month or 2,000 a month. Also, I just wanted to know how, because this has been an issue we've had in Sorrento. What do you define a short-term rental as? What time period?
Less than 30 days
Okay,
is how it's defined.
right, right. Okay.
I'd like to just hop in here. I have two short-term rentals, and I've had one for 17 years and another one for a couple of years. And I've done a couple of winter rentals, and despite the oddball, well, mine are very small, one bedroom, and despite the oddball short-term renter you might get really every once in a blue moon, it's way less wear and tear because they're really not here. A lot of people come in for 3 days. They have a list of things they want to. They're hardly here, and when you're dealing with people that are living there year round, and it's very different because I've done both. That's just my experience.
Hmm. Yeah, no, that's great perspective. Thank
And
you.
I'll be frank. I'll be frank with you. I mean, there's no comparison between what you can make with a short-term rental and what you can make with a monthly rent, year-round rental. That's just the reality of it. And I do it because I need the extra income. So
Yeah,
thank you.
I think there's a lot of others just like you that do it for that reason, and that's not to say it's bad at all. It's
I know
opportunity.
and I feel it's a real quandary because I know there are people that really need places to live, and I wish I could afford to do it another way. So
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Like so many things in the housing world, there's two sides, and it all depends on so many things. Thank
I,
you for
I
sharing,
think
Jackie.
I think the long term really you have to separate short-term rental housing as an economic activity from real residential housing. Uh, they're 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 kind of two separate things, and obviously short-term rentals can um, make it harder to provide long-term housing. But it's as economic activity, they're really two separate things. Short-term rentals are a business.
Right. Yeah, that's a whole nother conversation.
and you know what?
Real quickly. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I just wanted to say that I think what I've noticed, I know a lot of people that do short-term rentals here, and most of them are doing it for the extra income. Like in the old days, I've been coming up here for 40 years, although I've lived here about 20. And old days, people might rent a week or two just to cover their taxes. But other than that, it wasn't, I mean, Airbnb wasn't around then, any of that. But there is a real sentiment about people really resenting people that have short-term rentals who live here, and it might even be on their own property, people from out of state or out of the area who are buying up multiple properties strictly as short-term rentals.
Mhm.
And that's a whole other level and layer. So
Right. And I suppose that's where ordinances and regulation and things can step in um, to incentivize different things. Yeah, a lot to tackle. So moving on from the 2021 to 2024 period in Gouldsboro Winter Harbor, um, right around 300 unique short-term rental listings during that period. As I mentioned, um, that number was around 16% of the entire housing stock that was at one point listed as a short-term rental in that area. Similar breakdown of one, two, and three bedrooms as the county. And as far as those seasonal units, the vacant units that are used for seasonal, recreational, occasional use, in 2020, it's roughly 36% of Gouldsboro's housing units and 42% in Winter Harbor. As I mentioned, the Hancock's submarket also includes Franklin, so this isn't not entirely Sullivan and Sorrento, but right around 220 unique listings during that 3-year period. Again, ebbs and flows with the season as far as how many listings are actually active. Roughly 10% of the housing stock in that region. And in 2020, roughly half of Sorrento's total housing units were listed as vacant for seasonal, recreational, or occasional use. Smaller number of units in the town, obviously, and it is coastal. Around
Where does
30%
that number
of
come
the
from?
town
Excuse
itself.
me, where does that number come from? That
This
51%?
was pulled from the U.S. Census, the decennial census in 2020,
Okay.
and something I can forward you after or send you a link to in case you want to look at it
Okay.
in a little more detail. All right, getting into the actual Hancock County housing market itself. Again, this is all sort of high level, a lot more detail in the assessment itself. The number of units did increase over the last decade or so, although not as quickly as it did in the previous decade. Um, Roughly 1.5% increase between 2010 and 23, comparatively around 18% in the decade prior. And I think that has to do with a number of factors. The housing units themselves, in addition to being less frequently, are getting a little older. Roughly half of the units in the county were built before 1980. And as you can see in the figure, a few different booms, a lot built prior to 1940, and then in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, even the early 2000s, there was a relatively steady amount of the county units built during that time, and then sort of a drop off in the past decade. As we all know, most of the housing in the county is owner occupied, and most of it is single family. The median monthly housing cost for owner occupied units is slightly higher, I guess around $1,000 higher. This is according to the American Community Survey. Right around 10 to 50 for owners and 950 for renters as far as monthly housing costs go. And there's different costs associated with being a homeowner, so that makes sense. And the value of the homes themselves is projected to continue to increase over time. And we'll see how much of an impact, value has on whether people are buying and selling and how the housing market changes over the next several years. I did an analysis of the general housing market itself between 2019 and 2024. Again, this is all detailed a little more in the assessment. But the median sale price Well, it did essentially double over that 5-year period. And I think we all know COVID had a little bit to do with that. It started around 200,000 in 2019, and I last checked for what it was in July, and the median sale price in this past July was 440,000. This is countywide. Over this 5-year period, the number of days the home was on a market declined. The peak number of listings, again, similar to short-term rentals, kind of ebbs and flows with the seasons throughout the year, but the peak number each year slightly declined, as well as the number of listings available at the end of the month. So over this past 5 years, prices have gone up and supply, as it appears, has declined, which kind of results in the price shift. Although, I guess starting from 2025, it does seem like that there is a little bit of a shift happening. I have not done a deep dive on this, but just from what I've seen and some quick graphs that I've seen, it looks like homes are becoming more available. How that's impacting price, I think, is yet to be seen, but it looks like more homes are being listed, maybe staying on the market a little longer. So there seems to be a little bit of a shift happening there. We'll see how that plays out. As part of this assessment, I did a survey of multifamily rental housing throughout the county. These are larger multifamily properties. This is something I had a background in my previous job, doing market studies and rental surveys for housing assessments and whatnot. So I researched and identified as many of the multifamily properties in the county as I could. I think there were somewhere around 50 maybe, and I think I surveyed somewhere around 40, which ended up being around 1,100 total units. So a decent sample size to get an idea of how the multifamily housing market is doing. And long story short, essentially nothing is available, which again, I think we we're all aware of, but it was really interesting to put some of those thoughts to numbers. There was one property that estimated that they were roughly 95% occupied at the time when I called them. Otherwise, everything was full with a waiting list, or any property that had a vacancy had a waiting list that was going to be filled. And this includes market rate properties, a lot of government subsidized properties, which is a lot of the rental housing in the county, either USDA rural development or Section 8 subsidized. There are a handful of projects that were financed, subsidized by low-income housing tax credits, and then there are some other properties that have a combination of financing and subsidy options to help make those projects come to life. And like I mentioned, everything's pretty much filled. Nearly all bedroom types and project types have a waiting list. A big takeaway for me is that nearly 2/3 of all the units I surveyed were one bedroom, which makes some sense for the population that's here. A lot of older households, maybe single or couples that live here, but certainly is limiting if you're a family maybe with children and you don't fall into that affordable housing range. If you're looking for something at a market rate price for 2 or 3 bedrooms, your options are pretty limited. And it kind of puts you in that awkward place of living somewhere that you can't afford or living somewhere that's just not fitting. Additionally, around 60% of all the multifamily units that I surveyed were for seniors, 55 and older. And as we know, it's probably a good thing that we have that many available, although they're all filled, and so even more may be needed in the future. As far as affordability is concerned, Maine Housing has their affordability index. And since it started in the year 2000, it has not dipped below a 1.0. So on this scale, affordability index of 1 indicates that it is an affordable price for the median income. Anything above 1 is even more affordable. Anything under 1.0 signifies unaffordability. And full breakdown of every year since 2000 is in the assessment itself. But this past year, the affordability index for the county was 0.51, which translated to roughly 80% of county households being unable to afford a home at the median price, which in 2023 was 405,000. Not every town had an index for the year 2023, but Gouldsboro did and Sullivan did. They're also under 1.0. And Winter Harbor most recently had an affordability index done in 2022, also under a 1.0. And no indexes have been done for 2024. It looks like that part of the Maine housing data is under construction or in progress, so nothing was calculated as of this past year. But as figures show, affordable home price is not matched up with the actual median home price, and the index in both the county and the state has started to tail off since the 2010s. There is relatedly a income gap between the price itself and the price that is affordable. Out of all the towns that had an index in 2023, over 2/3 cannot afford the median home price. And that gap between the median income and the median income needed to afford a affordable home was close to $70,000. Um, and that's something that has gotten a little larger over the last few years. And as you can see, the last 5 years or 6 years of affordability index trends in the county, since 2019, it's gone down a little bit each year. Incomes, this is for renters. Incomes, I guess for both owners and renters, have not kept up with the rising price of homes. So you can see on the figure in the top right, renter income has grown only around 50%, while rents themselves have grown close to 150%. The most recent index that Maine Housing had for rentals was in the year 2020. So that's what these figures show. And median two-bedroom in 2020 was around 1,400, while the rent that was affordable to the median income was right around 900. And in the housing survey that I conducted of all multifamily rental properties for market rate, the median rent for a one-bedroom was just under $1,000, and the median rent for a two-bedroom was right around $1,400. And again, that does not align with the price that is affordable at this moment, at least. So all of this kind of painting a picture of why and where the housing struggles are right now in the county. Delve a little bit into cost burden and severe cost burden households. Again, if you're not familiar, if you're a cost burden household, you're spending 30% or more of your household income on housing costs. If you're severe cost burdened, you're spending over 50%. For homeowners, not as large of a gap. For anyone earning, less than 35,000, there's a little more cost burdened. Homeowners, a lot more significant for renters. If you're earning less than 35,000, even earning less than 50,000 as a household, there's a fair chance that you're going to be spending at least 30% of your household income on rent. For the towns in the Schoodic area, this was according to the most recent American Community Survey. As far as owners, between 13 and 25% are cost burden in each of the four towns, and then renters a little more. For Sorrento, I think that number is low just because there's very little rental housing in the town itself. And that number is pretty high in Winter Harbor. So again, these are just estimates, but kind of helps paint the picture of affordability in the Schoodic towns right now, as well as the entire county. There's, again, an entire section on demand in the assessment. And for demand, I use the state's housing projections. In 2023, they published a study showing the production needs for the entire state as a whole and broke it down by county. In Hancock County, that ends up by 2030 being between 3,400 and 3,700 additional units, accounting for historic underproduction and then estimating future need, low and high. And the figure on the bottom kind of is an illustration that they put together as far as how these totals can be reached based on the production each year. So essentially, from now on, that's around 400 units created each year. Tall task, but it's a goal to try and achieve to reach these numbers that the state has identified for Hancock County. In the assessment, I did, again, sort of a baseline estimate of where that demand falls as far as incomes go. And there are a number of factors that influence demand, as we all know. But I used HUD affordability levels and household income limits to kind of help guide these projections or estimates. Below 50% AMI all the way up to over 100% AMI. And the figures on the bottom kind of show the projected demand needs for each income level for the state's low estimate of 3,400 total units and the state's high estimate of 3,700 units. And this is based on, so to calculate these numbers, I hope I'm explaining this clearly. I use the most recent income estimates for the county, as well as the breakdown of owner to renter ratio. And again, as I mentioned, right around 3/4 of the county is owning and right around a quarter is renting. And so I kind of use those numbers to calculate the demand for each income group. More detail on this in the assessment itself, but ultimately for renters, more housing is needed at the lower income levels. And for owners, based on how the current income distribution is throughout the county, more units that could be filled at the 100% AMI or greater level. And again, a number of factors influence this as far as age, jobs that become available, how wages increase or decrease, the amount of commuters that might be in demand for housing, cost burden households. There's a number of factors that influence how these can change by income group. Overall takeaway is that more housing units are needed, and as more units are built, the population will shift and hopefully balance out accordingly. All right, I will keep trying to move along here. This is running a little longer than I thought. As far as development goes, the amount of permits being issued has trended upwards in the last 5 or so years. And as far as where development is occurring, it's primarily happening in Ellsworth and Bar Harbor and sporadically in other places of the county as well. There are some units in the pipeline as far as single family for sale as well as multifamily rental. And so assuming all of those are built and permits continue to be issued, we will be making progress to reach these housing goals that the state has established. In the assessment, working with Addison, our GIS specialist, we created a web application, and this is a screenshot to give you an example of how you can explore this, and a link will be shared so you can access this yourself if you're curious. But this kind of illustrates different opportunities and constraints for growth throughout the county. And this can be explored on a deeper level once you use the actual app itself. But to give you a brief overview, yellow is where current growth areas are throughout the county, according to comprehensive plans. Um, when we did this, Sullivan did not yet have their plan completed or approved. Obviously, Gouldsboro and Sorrento, Winter Harbor, all still in progress, so no growth areas for these towns are included. Red signifies where existing water and sewer infrastructure exists, as well as a potential buffer for expansion. And then blue is environmental and other constraints that might limit where housing can be developed. And so a fun tool to explore and kind of help identify where housing can and maybe should be built in the future. It's our hope that this can really be used by developers, builders, municipal officials to kind of nail down where housing should be built in these towns and how effectively it can be built in certain areas. I'll run through some of the results of the household survey real quickly. We did this advertised for several months, around just over 600 responses countywide, and so it paints a valuable picture. When asked if housing was found suitable and affordable, surprisingly, folks said it is not affordable. 77% believe it's difficult to find suitable housing, not affordable, and there's not enough. Again, a lack of year-round housing, similar themes. When asked about previous or current housing-related issues that were experienced, the most popular that was experienced was being cost-burdened. Some had to move in with family or friends, or didn't have a sufficient deposit or down payment. All of this can again be detailed a little further in the assessment itself. Top issues that negatively impact the county housing market, again, according to those that took the survey, prices and rents are too high, not enough options, and year-round housing being converted into short-term rentals or seasonal rentals. Wages was among the top responses as well. When asked what types of housing were needed in the county, family housing and single-person housing were right at the top of the list, as well as rentals that accept housing choice vouchers and senior living apartments, and then right there, senior care facilities. As I mentioned before, there are some assisted living and residential care facilities throughout the county, but right now, no nursing homes, a challenge that could be difficult to overcome in the future. As far as styles go, respondents thought that modern move-in ready homes were most needed, as well as single-level homes and rehabbing existing homes. Also up there were modular homes with pre-approved designs. One interesting concept for creating housing. Took a few takeaways from the Gouldsboro Winter Harbor study, and again, Jackie or Josh can feel free to comment more on this if they choose to, but takeaway there, those two towns will need to add almost 40 units to maintain the number of working age households in the next 5 years. It'll help provide housing for some of the area's displaced workers, which is workers that are commuting to the two towns for work and living outside. And again, these units should target between those that make 50% and 120% of the area median income, similar to all the needs for the county itself. And as you can see in the figure, quite a gap between the price that is affordable for a home in both Gouldsboro and Winter Harbor. Working age households are projected to decrease. Senior, higher income households are projected to increase over the next several years in these two towns. So something to consider when identifying the types of housing and the levels of income for housing that need to be constructed. And there was also a housing survey conducted in this assessment. Few quick takeaways. Right around 60% said that their current housing meets their anticipated needs for at least the next decade. 13% said it does not meet their needs. And most said their ideal housing would be to own a single family home, not surprisingly. And right around 70% believe that municipal government should be involved in achieving housing goals and that the main housing issues are cost and availability, to no one's surprise. All right, that is a brief summary of the contents of this assessment. There's a lot. Again, deeper dives that you can take on each specific section. And that's right towards the end of my time, so I did not leave too much for questions unless people want to stick around. I'll leave it open now if you have any questions or comments, or if Josh or Jackie, you want to talk more about the Gouldsboro study itself.
I don't think there's much to say as far as Gouldsboro goes. It's pretty much in line with everything else that you showed for the rest of the county. Probably most of the state, particularly along coastal areas. So I think the data pretty much speaks for itself, but you did a great job compiling it with the rest of the stuff that
Josh, I'm
you.
sorry. Maybe it's just me, but we can't really hear you right now.
No,
I don't know if it's your connection or what.
I can hear.
I heard.
okay.
Well, with regards to the RFPs that we'll put out there, someone did come up and take a look because he reached out to me to say he forgot his bag behind. So I have his bag with me. Nothing in it, but I have his little LL Bean backpack.
Sorry, what was that for?
The RFP that was put out. So someone had gone up to go take a look, and he left some personal items behind.
Ah, gotcha. Okay, yeah, I've gotten, I guess, an update on those RFPs. I have gotten just a handful of phone calls, just asking questions about the projects themselves and a little more details about them. Seems like there is some genuine interest, and these are some interesting projects that will receive some bids. I have received one bid so far for the Gouldsboro study. It was from an economic consulting firm in Nevada, which is really interesting. Yeah, I've never heard of them before. But they submitted a bid.
A lot of
And so
experience with coastal Maine towns.
I'm
I'm
gonna
sorry, what is this study for? What is this like another, what is this study?
I will explain it. I apologize for that. So there's a parcel in Gouldsboro, um, in the
The Eaton
hands of Maine.
parcel, Jackie. The Eaton
Yeah.
parcel.
West Bay, yeah.
Okay. That parcel in Gouldsboro, and there's also a town-owned identified parcel in Sullivan. And we met and drafted RFPs for feasibility studies on each of these parcels, and which will entail a basic soil and water quality analysis, in Sullivan, some sort of environmental review or environmental analysis for surrounding land conditions, as well as some identification of where housing can and should be built on each of these parcels. Those are the main projects within these RFPs.
Okay. Is
With
that,
the
Bob, is that a duplication of some of the work Maine Coast Heritage Trust has already done over there, or Bob DeForest?
Yeah, this will be in complement that work, but they'll be looking at the plan is to look at it in greater detail to come up with the feasibility and the assess some of the needs for the property.
Okay, thanks.
Right. Main takeaway is to have some of that due diligence done and to help establish whether housing can be feasibly built on each of these parcels, and then
Sure.
from there doing a little bit more investigation and um, possibly construction in the future, depending on the results.
Yep.
And that is being supported through the municipal housing grant that was received from in the town of Sullivan.
Okay, great. Um, yeah. And they'd be looking at considering different things like cluster housing, kind of like what they did in Deer Isle, that sort of thing. So,
Right. Uh, I believe we included in there at least some sort of thoughts, designs of the types of housing that would be most feasible on these parcels. So that's one example. Yes,
okay, great. Thank you.
and those are bids are I guess are coming in by the end of the month, and so we'll see if I get any more, I'll update you once the month ends, and we'll get together and form review teams and start going over those.
Good, great. Thank you.
Hmm. Any other last questions about the housing assessment itself? I know that was kind of a lot. Again, there's even more in the assessment itself, but hopefully that helped paint a picture of housing in the county. I think we all know kind of where things stand, but having all this one place and having that data available will ideally help everyone moving forward with writing
You know,
grants and using demographic information for projects and all of
Hey,
that.
Greg, I have one question. I don't know if I missed it. It could have been in there or R32. I don't remember, but um, just anecdotally, a lot of the rentals here, short-term rentals, are on the water. Everybody wants to be on the water. They're not necessarily all on the water. Quite a few are, and those properties have not been within reach of most home buyers for at least 20 years. Those properties have been so expensive. And I think that's
Hmm.
another part of it too. And having listened to a lot of different people, one of the biggest problems here is we just stopped building housing. Isn't that it? Is that one of the
Yeah.
issues? Yeah, we
Yeah,
just stopped building.
production itself is just declined compared to the past. And so housing stock itself is one of the main problems, that there's just not enough available. And um, with people living, I guess, on or near the coast and rather being reluctant to sell those homes or selling them at high value, it kind of
Yeah.
boxes them in.
And where do you get the incentives? You were talking about before, where do you get the incentives to encourage someone to build year-round housing, make it worthwhile? They can make some
How to
kind
make
of
those incentives? Yeah, that's an entire new discussion.
Well, what was the one you talked about down in Massachusetts? Any more details on that one?
That's something I'll do a follow-up on. That was in Nantucket. They have a handful of different programs that they've started doing initiatives with, and I'm very curious to see how they're going or how they can be kind of molded, fit our area. So I think that could be a good potential model to look at, and I'll do some more research on that and do a follow-up.
Yeah, I read one story, Greg, in the New York Times about it. It was either the New York Times or the Globe, Boston Globe, where they sold an affordable home to a school teacher. It was 780,000. I doubt she paid. I doubt she paid 780,000. But I'd love to know how that formula works. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, how do they make that happen? That's a great question.
That would be a good topic for the next monthly meeting is folks could bring their sources and things that they've found or examples, but that research on the Nantucket and other incentives could be a good topic of discussion.
Yeah.
Is this something folks would be interested in learning a little more about or discussing?
Yeah, I'd be really interested in how communities are handling this anyway, everywhere, really. I mean, yeah.
Yeah, I like that idea. I think next month then we'll time to focus on what other communities are doing to help bridge that affordability gap or other incentives or programs that they've established. And this can go, I will share anything that I find or Olivia finds, and that'll go for anyone else that comes to the meeting and joins and wants to share some information or sources that they know as well.
I really appreciate it.
Great. And I appreciate all of you coming back for a second round. Hopefully didn't put you to sleep too much. I know kind of dense stuff, but it's interesting and it's all relevant. So appreciate all of your time. We'll send up a follow-up email recapping kind of what we talked about here, outlining what we're talking about next month. And in case you forgot, we do have a webpage on the HCPC website where the recording for this will live, meeting notes, links that we talked about will all be shared there and will be made available until next month's meeting. And that will once again take place on the fourth Wednesday of the month at 10 a.m. And I will make sure you're all aware of that date when we send the follow-up email. So until then, thank you very much and have a great
Thank
rest of your
you.
week.
Thank you,
Appreciate it.
Greg.
Thank you, Greg.